Katahdin is Maine's highest mountain, at just shy of a mile high. As mountains go, this isn't particularly tall, but it's the nature of the climb that sets Katahdin apart from other East Coast day hikes. Once you get above treeline, it's truly just a pile of rocks. Big rocks for clambering over, little rocks for stumbling over, and it's steep. No auto roads wind round it, no scenic choo-choo trains climb its sides. If you want to see the view from the top, be prepared to work for it. In fact, when you see Katahdin, it doesn't seem possible that you're still in Maine at all. Its steep, rugged sides seem almost out of place with the pretty green foothills we're used to in Maine. The mountain was formed 400 million years ago, a mass of molten rock deep underground. Hundreds of millions of years of erosion removed layers of rock 2 miles thick and exposed the granite we see today. When glaciers covered our state and miles of ice covered even the highest mountains in New England, they carved the cirques into Katahdin's sides, leaving the steep, rounded indentation. They also left moraines, piles of glacial debris that were carried along by the ice and then left behind when it melted. Katahdin was named the greatest mountain by the Penobscots. Pamola, the god of thunder, was said to inhabit the top of the mountain and was not happy with mortals making the climb. With the head of a moose, the body of a man, and the wings and feet of an eagle, Pamola caused the cold weather that is typical of the mountain, even in the summer months. I first learned about Mount Katahdin in the 4th grade when our teacher read us the story of Don Fendler, a 12-year-old boy who was separated from his group while hiking the mountain in 1939. He spent the next 9 days wandering the wilderness of Baxter State Park and the surrounding area. Don very nearly died, but a strong sense of hope and courage never left him, despite agonizing loneliness, fatigue, and starvation. Don's story was so memorable that I never forgot its details and its amazing true message, that hope can rescue one from near certain death. When Don visited our town several years ago to share a new version of his story, which had been recently published, I was thrilled to meet him and to hear the story again live and in person. And then several years ago, I started teaching 4th grade. Moving up from 3rd, I inherited a new curriculum and set of books which, to my delight, included Don's story. Reading it now as a mother of boys, my heartstrings were tugged in new ways, and my students saw their teacher tear up as Don stumbled through the wilderness, urged on by an inexplicable force, and was ultimately reunited with his family. A dream was kindled as I heard the story again. I knew I wanted to hike Katahdin. I was fairly certain that I wanted to do it without my children, however. There would be no lost on a mountain trail for us, thank you. When my boys caught wind of my plans, however, they were adamant that they join me. My husband also decided to join us, not wanting to be left out of the adventure. And so it was late last winter that at a bowling alley birthday party of all places, over the din of the music and the crashing pins, my friend Lissa plunked down next to me and some other moms and said, out of the blue, "Does anyone want to hike Katahdin this summer?" A planner and an organizer, Lissa had our sites reserved by the end of that week. The momentum of her no-nonsense approach to event planning was enough to undo my usual foot-dragging response to hopes and dreams. She had done the research and knew that campsites needed to be reserved precisely 4 months in advance and that they went fast. And with that, we were committed. We hiked the biggest mountains we could find in our part of the state, did core workouts as a family on the living room floor, preparing for the boulders we'd be encountering in July. I also wrote to Don and told him of our plans. As I knew he would, Don wrote back and gave us his blessing. Before we knew it, July had come and we were headed north on I-95 to Millinocket. Our campsites were at Roaring Brook, and we settled in and ate well the night before our hike. We turned in early and slept fitfully, our alarm set for 5 a.m. We'd been advised to hike early by our friend Gardner, a former Baxter State Park ranger, who knew from experience that things could get busy up there and encouraged us to enjoy the mountain in as much solitude as possible. We'd also read the weather report on the chalkboard at the ranger station. Early afternoon would bring with it a chance of thunderstorms and hail. The hike was expected to take 8 to 12 hours, and we did not want to be stuck in the same icy weather that Don had encountered. Quick up, quick down, and then Lissa's husband Andy, a trained chef, would have a gourmet camp dinner waiting for us. Morning came and we were up and at 'em, bustling about in the dead silent campground trying to be the first to hit the trail. We signed in on the ledger at the ranger station, finding that a couple of groups had snuck out before us, and started in on the first leg of the journey to Chimney Pond, 3.3 miles of only slightly uphill trail. Every so often a viewpoint would open up and give us a glimpse of what was ahead. Pamola, we hoped, had Tuesdays off and wouldn't mind our excursion. Chimney Pond was stunning, as Gardner had promised. The cirque loomed above, and the pond's water was crystal clear. But we knew we had only a few minutes to stop and rest and cram in some calories before we hit the trail again, in hopes of avoiding incoming weather. The next leg was the Cathedral Trail, and the ledger told us that only 2 people had started up it ahead of us. The trail is only 1.5 miles long, but it's straight up. I had voiced a preference for the Saddle Trail, a gentler ascent to the north, and recommended for people hiking with children. But when I found I was outnumbered 5 to 1, including the children, I knew I had no choice but to carry on. The climb takes you over 3 huge piles of rock, the cathedrals, and much of it involves scrambling straight up over boulders. At several points it felt as though we were taking part in those hokey team-building activities at a summer camp, working together to get the whole team up and over a particularly rugged straight up and down rock face. The only difference was the drop-off that awaited if our team members failed to cooperate. At the top of the trail we found ourselves in a great thick cloud. Pamola's plumes. Rain fell from his angry clouds. We forged ahead, sticking close, and found the next trail, which led to the top of Baxter Peak. We were on the plateau now, and the rocks were no longer enormous boulders, but still required some maneuvering as we clambered over loose bits of granite. And then suddenly there it was, an understated brown sign indicating the end of our climb, and also the end of the trail for the AT's thru hikers. Just as we summited, the clouds opened up, giving us a look for the first time of the morning's view in reverse. We could now see where we had come from, as well as the ponds and hills all around. Just as sudden was the crowd that gathered. 2 college boys celebrated the end of their hike that had started in Georgia 3 months earlier. Ravens gathered to find out what people had brought them for lunch. The throng was a bit overwhelming after hours and hours of hiking with our small group and seeing almost no one. The clouds rolled in and out, giving us quick glimpses of what seemed to be the entire state of Maine laid out below us. After some more carbo loading and congratulatory photo ops, we turned and headed back down again, this time across the plateau to the north. We'd need to take the Saddle Trail down, as Cathedral is too steep for a descent. We greeted scores of people on their way up. Elated by what we had just accomplished, we couldn't help but encourage them and needlessly point out how close they were to the top. Eventually we reached the top of the Saddle Trail, which drops off the edge of the plateau and looks like little more than a rock slide. Saddle brought us back down to Chimney Pond, where we stopped again by the shore for a bit. The peak loomed above us again. The hop, skip, and jump back to Roaring Brook, which should have been the easiest leg of the journey, was endless. We were nearing 10 hours into our hike and we were exhausted. The gentle descent taunted us and we literally tripped over our own feet. Finally, we stumbled into camp where, as promised, Andy had a full spread ready. We fell into our camp chairs and propped our bright pink feet by the fire. We returned to civilization and to our lives the next day. I, for one, however, felt changed somehow. Our 10-hour trek, fully outfitted and fed, was nothing in comparison to Don's incredible story. But I had been to the place where his story began. He was lost, and it seemed to the world that they should give up hope. His family never stopped believing, however, never stopped searching. And Don continued to believe that help was just around every bend in the river, even when he could barely pick himself up again. I, too, had a time in my life when the world had every right to give up on me. I could easily have laid down and given up on myself. But my family, my parents, and my dear boys and husband didn't give up on me, and that's what gave me hope, their belief that I'd come out of the woods.